and welcome back to Wednesday here on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your host, Eric. This week we are talking about general advice for newbies. This week we have a couple of questions, or rather a couple of option ideas one from Kulain, ruled by Venus, I'm assuming is the appropriate pronunciation, and one from Mikali 2290. Kulain, ruled by Venus, wrote, I just uploaded a video directed at people new to paganism, and now I'm wondering how you too would address them. Considering the broad spectrum of all that it is entails, and even all that is made out to be by those who misunderstand and misrepresent it. I'm asking for your thoughts on this in the spirit of general advice and suggestions. I had suggested that newcomers should gather many perspectives about it, and thought what better accommodation than the pagan perspective. And then Mikali 2290 writes, I need help being a pure pagan. I've been raised in a Christian family and I'm only 12. I want to be a pagan but was never taught how. Can you help me? And how many gods are there? So, I'm going to answer Mikali 2290's question first because it's the shorter of the two. Being a pure pagan, being purely pagan simply means that you believe that your personal path is, or that the path that you're on is non-Abrahamic, and you don't believe that the Abrahamic religion has it any better or any more correct than anyone else does. Or you're that far, far left pagan who believes that the Christians and the Abrahamic faiths have it all wrong. In which case, I would say to him or her the same thing that I would say to anyone else, and that is do your own study and your own meditation and your own come to your own understanding. Don't depend on others to decide and teach you, as opposed to learn for yourself. So the last part of that question was, how many gods are there? And I believe very much in the way Kara put it yesterday, with there are an infinite amount of gods. If you believe in it and you see it as a higher power deity, it is. Whether anyone else will, or is believing in the same thing you're believing, it's whatever you believe is. So, getting back to the previous question, how do we deal with things, and some of our suggestions for people who are new to a pagan path? Well, I'm going to start with saying this is probably going to be a very long video, and I'm sorry for that, but you should start at the beginning, and in the beginning of any new endeavor or idea or path that you are on, the first thing you should do is decide for yourself what you want for yourself. If that falls into a path that you then research later, awesome. And if not, keep going with it. Whatever is right for you is right for you, and nobody else should or can tell you what to do when it comes to your spirituality and your personal beliefs. If you're taking everyone's advice, that's fine, but if you're taking someone's advice as, dogma and law, in my opinion, you're doing it wrong. Because a spiritual path should be something that is exceedingly personal, and really, even in the more well-based practices of Catholicism and Christianity in general, and any of the Abrahamic religions, those religions are experienced differently by each of its members. They don't all have the exact same experience. They have experiences that they share with one another, and they are similar, but ultimately a spiritual path is a very personal thing that others can't experience with you in the exact same way that you do. So, I would very, very first off say, experience it for yourself. Don't expect someone else to do it for you. The second part I would definitely stress is the idea that, especially in a heathen path, I don't know how it is for a whole lot of the other pagan paths, but especially in a heathen path, read the Eddas and do lots and lots and lots of your own research. Don't let anyone else do the research for you. Again, it's very much a personal thing, but the interpretations of the Eddas and the epic poems and all of the lore is something that you have to read as much as you possibly can so that you can get a personalized personal belief system of what is and what is not valid in the available literature. I would say, if at all possible, stick to the academic stuff, because the stuff that has been written by, Joe Schmuck off the street is his opinion. I mean, the academic stuff also is a summation of an opinion. It's an opinion backed with as much research as the person was either able or willing to do. So that's what I tend to steer people towards when I have the opportunity to say, look, if you read as many translations of the Eddas as you can, you're going to have a better grasp on the lore and the beliefs and the understanding of the way the ancestors were and what we've come to expect most heathens to do. So it's one of those things where very much you have to do the reading yourself, because if somebody else is reading it to you, that's one thing. But if somebody else is just telling you the stories and teaching you what they know, you're not getting nearly as broad a range of information as you should be. It's one of those things where you have to go out and you have to do the research yourself, and you have to do the reading and the introspection, and you have to take it into yourself and go, is this something I believe? Does this benefit me in some way? And you do have to pick and choose as to whether or not you're going to just step into, say, an Asatru kindred and go with the flow, or if you're going to sit down and go, this is what I believe, and although they believe similarly, there's enough difference that I am going to go my own path, and I am going to do it all for myself. That's how I've decided to go, is I have to do it all for myself. If something like a kindred or a kith or some group of that nature is something that you want, as opposed to, doing all of the introspective self-examination and the research that requires a good solid, in my opinion, a good solid faith of what you're believing and practicing, then go for it. Nobody's going to fault you for that. It's exceedingly time consuming and difficult to do it yourself. But again, in my opinion, I think it's entirely worth it. I think it's entirely worth me being able to, like, for example, spout off random information from the lore when it's appropriate in a conversation, whether I'm having a conversation about, my religious spiritual path or not. If there's a comparison to make and I want to make it, I can, because I have that information and I know where it came from, which is, a lot of times a very difficult thing to do if you're just stepping into a role that someone else has formed for you. So do your own research. I can't stress that enough. Do your own research. Read as much as you can get your hands on. Read as many translations of the same information as you can. It does seem a little redundant, and a lot of it is really saying the same thing. It's just each different translator has his own take on what the words meant, so you have to take into account that they're not all going to have the same feel, and they're not always going to even be the same story. So, again, do all your reading as much as you can get your hands on. Learn everything you can. Take in what is valid to you, and take into consideration the idea of the people who are putting this information out. And some of it will be wonderful to you, and some of it will not. Don't get discouraged. That's a very big thing. Is sometimes, as Kara stated in her video yesterday, sometimes you're the one getting down on you, and that's kind of difficult to deal with. Just sit back and be a little retrospective on your own actions and whether or not you're doing something that you find morally reprehensible. If you are, stop doing that and find a different way. When it comes to dealing with people who are opposed to you having your faith and your belief, one, if you've done all of the if you're doing the research and forming your own opinions about what you believe, When somebody comes walking up to you and says things like, well, you're being duped, and nobody is, you don't have the truth, and you're just deluding yourself. The argument there comes from the research to say, look, I've been doing the research. I've researched your religion as well, and I believe that this works better for me. So another thing that you may have to do is when people say, well, you're going to hell, you can then turn around and tell them, look, I realize that you're worried for me, and I appreciate that you want me to be saved. I don't need saving, and according to you, this is what's going to happen. According to me, that doesn't exist for me. It may exist in your afterlife, it does not in mine. And that's one very specific argument that I've used personally, and is something to take into consideration that you can use for yourself. Another thing that I would very much stress, especially for new pagans, is don't be resentful. When somebody comes up to you and says you need to be saved, I want you to come to church with me, I want you to get baptized in my church, and I want you to be a full-fledged, saved, converted member of my religion, understand first that they do that because that's what their religion tells them to do, because their religion says if you are not part of this religion, you're going to be lost, and God doesn't want that. Accept that that's what they feel, and that's what they believe, and that's what they think. Accept that that's the fact for them. And then say, look, I understand that that's how it is for you. And I appreciate that you're trying to do good for me. I, however, have to follow my own path. So thank you, but no thank you. And do your very, very best, even though Christianity and the Abrahamic religions have been prominent for so long in our Western culture that it is difficult to think outside that, and it seems very, very oppressive sometimes. You have to take into consideration those people have their right to believe and feel and know as they do. So you have to not get upset with them. They want you to be part of them. You want to be separate. Both of those beliefs and feelings and truths have to be allowed to exist. They don't have to get along, but they have to be allowed to exist. And getting upset and blaming Christians for things that are not their fault, especially today's Christians, it's not most of their fault that paganism is a less prominent religion than it was, thousands of years ago. The people who were born today were born into a Christian society that they have no control over from the moment of their inception. It's not their fault that a lot of the old religions died away. Their ancestors, sure. Should we be blaming them? No. This is what I'm saying. So being resentful and being brash and angry and loud about the Christian repression of the pagan, denominations, that's not going to help you, and it's not going to make them more your friend. You don't have to make them your friend. You just have to agree to disagree and to be civil to one another. So outside of that, I would say find your own truth. Do as much research as you can. You don't have to be standoffish, and you definitely don't have to you don't have to take anything you don't have to do anything solely based on shock value. People will be shocked enough if they see that you honestly believe what you're telling them you believe. So that is basically it for this video for me. Before I get ready, before you guys leave me, I want to make a brief announcement. Last week I posted a late video on how to getting to know me, and I just wanted to say really quick, in that video I had never been mentioned in the newspaper before, but 3 days ago on Sunday the 9th, I was at the Pagan Pride Festival here in Salt Lake City doing rune readings, and not only my picture, but I had a note in the Salt Lake City Tribune doing rune readings for people at Pagan Pride. So I have finally been 33 years after my birth, finally been noted in a local newspaper. So if you want to go take a look at that, I will probably at some point in the near future, maybe not as soon as this is uploaded, but maybe shortly after, in the comment section, I might post the link to that article. So if you guys wanted to take a look at it, I just wanted to brag a little bit about that before I let you go. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this video or anything that I have to say, feel free to put those in the comment section below. I will try and keep an eye on those for the next week or so. But thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, until next time, Odin be with you.